Voyant tools text to data. Basically, Voyant Tools is an open source collection of 20 plus, and at this point I think it's 28 interactive tools which allow for data extraction and provide textual and statistical analysis to uncover insightful patterns or trends within or across text that an individual may be studying. Now, these text mining tools of course help our job by making it far more efficient. It can arrange collections, it can reveal certain subjects that are prominent in a collection, and this knowledge is useful to both researchers and information professionals. So as we use these Voyant tools, it's another way for us to grasp what something is about and communicate it to users without the necessity of reading an entire work or group of works. For myself, I was studying a collection of poems, which tends to be far more manageable, especially when you only have 20 plus poems. However, when you're thinking about large collections, political documents, things like this, Voyant tools becomes almost a necessity. One of the most valuable features of Voyant tools is the interactive and relational aspect of each of the tools. This means the tools can interact with each other simultaneously, and the program itself has some preloaded collections which are available for experimentation. However, for my purposes, it was best for me to create my own corpus. So when I began to create my corpus of Anne Webster poems, the first thing that I did was I went through and I cleaned the text. So as I've transcribed her poetry from her actual manuscripts and newspaper clippings, I've had to exclude a lot of the non-textual elements. For example, the sixth. Mary Lusby Webster, who transcribes Anne's, it's her sister Anne's poetry, was notorious for misspelling certain words, like for the example, the word suspense. So I went through and I filtered out all of those six. Additionally, dates. A lot of times the poems would have dates at the end, dates at the beginning, so I took all of those out in the months. Standardized spelling, that's one thing that might become an issue for most researchers. It was optional for my purpose. I enjoy the variant spellings. I'm working in the early 1800s, so we have a lot of the double S's, we have a lot of those lovely variant spellings that they used. So I enjoy those, I left those in. And then additionally, I formatted text. I saved each poem separately by name and then condensed them into a zip file, which made my actual process of downloading it into Voyant far easier. And I'm going to show you what I did. So if you will go into Voyant Tools, you can go to Upload. And I've already created my zip file, Poems for AI. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these guys in here. Now, it takes a moment to kind of upload your corpus, but then once it does, you have these lovely, colorful graphs. So let's go back to our main document here. So one of Voyant's tool's main features is to pull out words that are repeated throughout a document and display them in a variety of graphs so that users can fully learn the main ideas or themes of your corpus. Now, one thing, I have a couple of poems that I'm trying to attribute authorship to. So when you see an author using certain words over and over again, of course in Voyant they will draw to the top, they will be the largest, and I'll show you that in a moment. So that could be helpful, but for the main part, Voyant is not a tool for authorship, but it is excellent at looking at those keywords. For your output, you're going to have a dashboard that is going to have 5 default panels. And these include a Cirrus, a reader, trends, summary, and context tools. So let's look here. Right here is our Cirrus. Now, when I look at this Cirrus initially, I see words that I may not necessarily count I think I would place them more as a stop word for the time period. Like we have shall here, There's a like. So what I can do within this tool, I can go here to default options and I can go to stop words and I can go ahead and just ixnay those guys out. I can save, and then that will take out the shall and it'll allow those other words to sort of shine through. So here I have heart, I have death, muse, friend, and then I can kind of peek down here into the summary, and I'll see that my most frequent words in the entire corpus are friend, heart, dear, bosom, and Aberdeen. Now Aberdeen is really, really interesting because, of course, that's a place, and it allows me another avenue, another search avenue for to try to find record of Ann Webster, and if she ever traveled to Aberdeen, or if she knew somebody in Aberdeen, or so that's fascinating. Also, another thing is we can also go through distinctive words in each of the poems, which is why it's important when you save them to the zip file, as I mentioned earlier, that you would go ahead and use the title. But for example here, Harriet's tomb. So we have Cyprus, so if you know the area that the individual was probably buried in, you could look for a cemetery that had possibly a large collection of cypress. I mean, we are digging here. So it's really, there are ways that this can be used to help us find and locate our poet in history. So we have our seeress, we have our reader, which will focus on a particular poem. We have our trend, which is really interesting because it'll show you words, like we have shall, like, and then we come down here and we have some friend, of course, and heart, and friend again. So you can kind of go through. Here we have the context, and also it'll show bubble lines. So you can go through if you want to look at that. And then the collocates is pretty interesting. Let's go back to our main document. So as you can see, the output is fairly intuitive. It's easy to kind of click around. It's attractive to look at. So the context, of course, we saw some of the surrounding sentences, how she uses words, the sort of grammatical devices that she tends to lean on, and then we have that line graph. But there are, like I said at this point, 28 different tools within the Voyant that you can use. These tools all interact with one another, so if you expand one, it'll expand the other. But yet again, one of the weaknesses is that it cannot accurately convey all subjects or content text or completely replace a close reading by an expert. But it does narrow down which documents need to be closely read. For example, the Aberdeen was a good example of that. Throughout here recently, we have had some examples of Voyant tools usage. I was really interested in the Millard study. It was right down the road and it was conducted at MTSU. But he actually used it. He used it to text on 8 scholarly essays about historic materials, about Tennessee's history between the American Civil War and the American Civil Rights Movement. So that's a really fascinating one. It's entitled Trials, Triumphs, and Transformations, Tennessee Search for Citizenship, Community, and Opportunity. So this is a lovely example of how Voyant tools can be used for research. Additionally, another great thing about Voyant is that it allows the researcher to look at the macrosphere. Although it's primarily a digital humanities web tool that analyzes text-based documents, it can also analyze a single document or several together, as we did with Ann Webster's poems, and it allows you to look at the work the works, plural, on a macro scale. The balance between saving time and creating accurate descriptions, of course, is a struggle for all of us as we juggle many, many balls in the air, and sometimes you just simply do not have enough time to read all of these political documents or historical documents or whatever you may be cataloging or researching. And as a text mining tool, Voyant is able to accelerate that process. Another issue with some of these AI tools I've come across is equity. Voyant tools helps reduce bias in a text because it only cleans the data with a set of neutral stop words. As I went in and I took out the shall and the like, you can do that. And it leaves everything else in its initial screening. Despite it being unbiased, however, it cannot stop a user from adding bias or undoing any bias within the corpus itself. So for my purposes, my results of my corpus, so when I did a lexical analysis, when I broke down things into smaller units, of course I showed you that the most common words were friend, heart, dear, bosom, and Aberdeen. We had a lot of patterns of repetition or emphasis. With her, there was a lot of death, a lot of friendship, a lot of heart, a lot of speaking, emoting from those sort of heart feelings. Some distinctive words that came to the forefront. We had the name Susan in Greenwich, which I discovered just through traditional research methodology of actually hitting the archives, that she does have a friend, Susan Rogerson in Greenwich, who actually was the wife of the gentleman who worked at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, which we see a lot of Anne's poetry talk about the cosmos and solar system and weather, and so we see a lot of that influence from Susan and her husband. Then we also have Aberdeen, which I have not been able to find a link with yet, so that is had I been coming to Voyant Tools cold, that was quite literally glowing at me to say, look here. So H.W. Fendlin, we have her sisters. Her sister married a merchant seaman, so we have somebody who's going from Finland to Sweden a lot, so that was a good clue. And then we have Harriet's tomb, which I pointed at. In that poem, we have a death date, so it was easy for me to locate that individual. And then we have a mystery lady named Maria, and she was quite literally glowing in the cirrus cloud as well. So that would alert me to the fact that I need to find more about Maria, and we actually have 4 or 5 poems about this specific individual. So I am still trying to find that connection. When we look at thematic trends, we see turbulent relationship with Aberdeen. She is not happy about it. It has taken somebody from her. We have a lot of feeling words. We have a lot of associations with faithful and friendship. One thing that I do know about our author is that she worked as a poet for hire. She wrote several in memoriam pieces for Grimbarians and her neighboring villagers. I've actually been able to try, just as Harriet's tomb, because I have a death date, I've been able to find those people, those individuals in census, find out how they died, find a connection with Anne to those individuals. So that was really interesting. Also, I looked at stylistic patterns in the Voyant tool, and for the most part we have a traditional Shakespearean sonnet that is utilized time and time again. And then we have contextual and comparative insights. So I'm looking at those similarity and differences when compared to other texts. And really what I've done is I've separated Anne's more emotive feeling poems because she also wrote 2 political pieces. She wrote Ode to Genius and Invocation to the Freeman of Grimsby. And in my research, I found her connection to Sir Thomas Phillips, who was a very famous book collector, but he also had a political bid to be on the Grimsby Board of Directors. And so she wrote these 2 pieces for him. So it was interesting to place these different styles of poems and see how her language was different, how the language changed, how in her political pieces the words were noticeably more direct and assertive, while her other works, when dealing with friendship or death, were more gentle, mournful, elegiac tones. So it was interesting to see that as well. And Voyant Tools did an excellent job of showing the difference between those two. All right, well, thank you so much.